one thing you're really good at is starting these one-man profitable internet businesses that are like sneakily big.
So Glassdoor is basically an anonymous site for people to leave a review on your employer. So I was like, okay, well, where did that all come from? How did that start? How did they start getting people to write reviews on a site like that? How did Glassdoor get reviews on the site initially? Do they run any incentives? So I was looking at that kind of thing. So things like that, I was like, it's just an interesting way to like start exploring an idea and where it's going to go and how it changes over time.
One thing I'm seeing you do is when you think about a company that makes a product, the thing that you can see on the internet is sort of like the tip of this iceberg. If you study the tip pretty closely, you can tell a lot of things about what's underneath the water level that you might not be able to see. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. We've been friends for a while. For people who don't know, you run the Ben's Bytes newsletter, which is a daily AI newsletter that I read every day. I love. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, daily AI newsletters in the space. You also invest in AI companies, and you are an exited founder. So you previously sold a company to Zapier. So you have a ton of experience as a founder, and I think you're also just great at the content media thing, and it's really fun to have you on the show.
I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, it was kind of an accidental content media founder journey, but yeah, that's what I am.
Yeah, I just sort of remember, I think this was like a year ago, but I just started seeing this guy. Anytime someone would like launch an AI demo, there was this guy that would just like pop up underneath any one of their projects, being like, "Hey, I just added this to like my Ben's Bytes newsletter. You should subscribe." And I was like, "Who is that guy?"
Yeah, that was like an unintentional thing that then other AI newsletters started copying as well, and I didn't realize it at the time that actually that's what Ryan Hoover did at Product Hunt. And I used to work at Product Hunt before I went and launched Makerpad. It was just like, hey, yeah, I'll put this. You should post this on Product Hunt, and then it must have been in my brain somewhere. And I then started realizing that if Sundar from Google is posting something about the Google AI thing, if I could be quick enough to just put my link underneath, it was actually a really good way to start like getting subscribers and you reaching the right audience in the right place. So that was a little hack that I didn't intentionally mean to be a hack, but it worked out well. And everyone else started doing it. I stopped doing it, but yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm curious, like just high level. I feel like a year ago was this big hype wave for AI, and I think you and me both like rode that to a certain extent and like got a lot of traffic and a lot of I don't know, just a lot of good stuff out of that wave. And I think that has started to dissipate, or at least it's changed. And we're starting to enter the like, it's not just AI. It's not just like you can tweet like some demo that you did with GPT-3 and it will just get 1,000 likes like immediately. We're less in the fancy demo hype phase and more in the like, we're actually starting to use this. Like, I'm curious how things have changed for you, or what you're thinking about right now in this current era of AI.
Yeah, I mean, on the business side, as a daily AI newsletter, I mean, I started it because there weren't any others. And at the time, this was like October 22, it was pre-ChatGPT, so it was definitely early. And then it was just riding that wave that everyone else was on and seeing anything and covering everything. I want to know everything that's launched and all the new stuff every single day. And then as we've come to sort of now, 2024, even my thinking of this is exhausting to get it out there. It's exhausting for someone who does this as a business to keep up with. What's the appetite really like for everyone else consuming this stuff as well? Where like chat with your PDF product number 57 is a new thing that on Product Hunt or Hacker News or whatever. Like, are we covering that again? Are we doing that kind of thing again? So there's a lot of the same stuff. So we've sort of thinking about that internally, and we launched Ben's Bytes Pro in December, where I speak to sort of similar actually to what you're doing, I guess, where I chat to businesses and CEOs and things of how they are using AI in their business and like changing their organization and rolling it out on products and stuff. Because I just think there's not that much out there. There's no like playbook on companies building with AI, and I think it's really interesting. So yeah, we started doing that and getting some really interesting conversations. But yeah, I don't know what the future holds with all of the daily stuff. Like there's just, we always joked about it being just this massive fire hose. It still is, and like our people's appetites changing towards, I actually want to know how to use this thing. I don't want you to just tell me a new tool every single day. Um,
I feel that. I mean, I just love how bored you sounded talking about the next PDF tool, number 57.
well, I mean, again, this still goes back to my product and days. I sort of somehow I was a community manager. It was my job to like let companies be on the homepage and like support their launches, and also like get in the comments and start people like talking about it. And then I got to a point where I must have just, it was probably a similar time frame where I was like, this is another dating app. This is another weather app. Why do we need this? What's the point of this? There are so many others. And maybe I haven't changed all that much since then, I guess. But I think it's just, I like seeing new things. I like seeing things that are different, or there's a reason behind doing this other than, oh, we've just done the same kind of thing as everyone else, but it's like slightly different because of this one thing. But equally, you see all these PDF products. There's plenty of them. You can do it in ChatGPT, and then there's companies like PDF AI making, I don't know, 200k MRR from just that, focusing on that one thing. So it's definitely like a bias between, I'm seeing all of this stuff. Other people are seeing maybe that one ad for that one tool and signing up and using it and finding it useful. So yeah, that's why I'm biased and like jaded by it, I guess.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think we're both sort of in pursuit of like what is genuinely interesting, and I think we both have moved from any new AI demo is interesting into like how are people actually using it. And I think that's definitely the concept of this show. Is there's so much um latent hype or latent energy around ChatGPT, like people just feel like they should be using it, but not enough people actually know how, because it's such a general tool and there's so many different ways you can use it, and even just remembering to use it is like kind of hard. And so yeah, I feel like we're sort of on the same wavelength there, like giving people the real ways that you use it or I use it, or lots of other smart people use it, is the most valuable thing you can do at this point in the AI wave.
Yeah, and I think that so many people come in with a question, get an answer, and they think that's what ChatGPT is. And I still do this today, where I will do that multiple times a day and think, oh, I didn't do all these other tips and tricks and ways I can get it sort of a better outcome. Sometimes you don't need that, but I think knowing that you have that there, and then after sort of practicing unintentionally some of these tricks or whatever you'd call them, over time you start recognizing that, okay, that's a good way to get a good response from something. I think I've learned some from this podcast. I think Sahil showed just regenerating a bunch of stuff and then just like going through the answers. It's like, okay, yeah, I know how to do that. I just think it's, if there's an error, do that, but it's not really for that. So yeah, there's so many different ways people can use it, that, and it's one of those tools that I intentionally think, if I've got something that I'm going to search, which AI tool am I going to use first, and like, should I just use AI for this? And I don't know whether my appetite for, okay, I know it might take me a few minutes to go and do this on ChatGPT, on Perplexity, wherever, versus go to Google and like do the work myself. Like, I'd rather be sat there doing the lazy work of the prompting and asking and figuring out whether the answer was what I wanted, rather than feeling like I'm doing the work, going through the blue links, going through the lists of lists of lists, to then be like, I'm still not where I was trying to get to. So I'm using it for everything small and bigger, at every moment like of the day. I'm just always trying to default towards, let's use AI for this somehow.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's one of the recurring ideas on this show is I think starting to think of yourself as a model manager rather than an individual contributor is like a really powerful idea. Specifically, like I think that helps in two ways. One is it avoids the problem that people have where they try one thing and then they're like, oh, it didn't work, or like it's not good enough or whatever. Because as a manager, if you're thinking of yourself as a manager, one of the skills of a good manager is to know what the employee that they're managing is good at and how to get the best out of them. And so I think that transfers very strongly onto AI. It's like it's your job as the model manager to know what it's good for and to know how to get the best out of it and to feel like you will get out what you put in. Um, and so I think it's super important for that, and it's also super important. You know, you're talking about you're defaulting to not having to click through all the blue links and stuff like that. Like, yeah, you're that's sort of what a manager does. It's like you're not necessarily in all the details all the time, but you can go in there sometimes if you need to. But that like being in that place is, I think, a little bit more of a management headspace than it is like an individual contributor headspace, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I just when you wrote that piece and you sent it to me, and I think I said something like, "Yeah, but I don't like being a manager. I don't want to be a manager. I can't ever think of myself like that. I don't think I don't. Well, I'm going to say I don't think. I'm pretty sure I wasn't a good manager when I ran my company, and it kind of feels like I don't know. I'm trying to do whatever this thing is now. Maybe don't want to call it a model manager, um, but you are learning similar things, like you said. It's which tool is best for this thing versus I'm just going to default to ChatGPT for everything. Um, Actually, it didn't give me the right thing. Did I ask it the right thing to give me the right thing back? Um, and you do have to think like that. But I'm certainly not thinking of myself like a manager. Maybe it's a branding problem, but yeah.
Maybe I have to rebrand it, but I'm sticking with manager because I
Yeah,
like being a
that's fine.
manager.
That's fine, yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess on that note, like I would love to just get into the sort of show and tell portion. I know you have a bunch of stuff to show me about how you use ChatGPT, and then I think we're going to broaden into other AI tools, which I'm actually like quite excited for. And the first one, it sounds like you're using ChatGPT to do research on companies. So to set it up, tell me a little bit about like what kind of company research you're doing and why you would want to use ChatGPT for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to scroll to find it because it's so far back. Um, so I'm just obsessed with business ideas. Always have been. It took me 50 plus ideas to get to Makerpad, which is the one thing that worked.
Your last company.
Yeah, so that's the one thing that worked, and that was like the byproduct of all the other things that didn't work. Because I was building them with no code, so I built a way those who can't do teach. So I taught people how to do that same thing, and then with Ben's Bites, we cover a lot of interesting products, a lot of interesting news. You see trends, you see how people are using stuff and all that, and it's just I don't know. I just can't help but think that's really interesting. What if that was that for something else? Like I think most people think of startups as get on TechCrunch, get funding from YC, and sort of shoot for the moon kind of thing. Where they're never the kind of businesses I don't say wanted to build. I wanted to build them before I started building Makerbad, and then realized I just like this kind of business. So bootstrapped, took Angel round, but I'm not looking for $1 billion outcome. Probably because of the manager thing. I don't want to be a manager of a 300,000 people company. But it's hard, and I think the lifestyle branding on those businesses has ruined it a bit because okay, who doesn't want a 2 million a year lifestyle business? That sounds great. So just think of products in terms of this company's doing this thing really interestingly. Is there a space that this for X, Y, Z could be done? Similarly, like really, if you look at lots of businesses, all the business models, all the ways that they do business are often pretty straightforward. Like you can see, okay, they do this thing, then this thing, then this thing. So it's just for me, I like to throw businesses in there and be like, what's a similar kind of business to this? And what's the different, like, where else would this kind of thing be useful? How would you think about building that kind of company? That kind of chat is what I like to do. So I'm going to put up a couple here. I'll share my screen now. So this was a chat I had with ChatGPT about a product called Yardstick. A stick with a Q. It's just from the company CB Insights. So they put together a bunch of like valuation data, funding, fundraising, interesting things like that. But I think the product is tens of thousands of dollars a year to access. I'm not paying that. But they have like this spin-off product called Yardstick. Learn what software buyers really think about their vendors, and it's effectively, from what I've analyzed, I suppose, is they go to Fortune 500 companies and say, "What are you using for X?" And then they'll have a transcript. They record their conversations, and then if you're a fellow sort of buyer in that market, you're going to spend tens of thousands on a new product. You want to know about the integration. You want to know the pricing. You want to know what the customer support was like. You want to know what the onboarding was like. Look at other companies similar to yours and sort of determine whether you're going to go down that road. So they have just on their landing page, it says enter a business email address, get a free trial, and it just has a bunch of testimonials. Essentially, it's effectively like a small snippet, a very small snippet from the transcripts that they have. So this is, for example, I'm showing there's one about Snowflake. The economics of Snowflake gave us a huge advantage. Instead of spending 15 million, we decided we could at least probably save 70% in terms of the cost that we were expending on Teradata if we went with Snowflake. So something like that is good to know if you're going to be spending millions on doing one thing with one vendor and you could be looking at another. So they've got a bunch of different companies here, but there's not much else on this landing page. And I can't pay the thousands of dollars to go and sign up for this. So I think I did some Google searches of what does like Yardstick product images. I looked back on some of the tweets from the CEO where they shared some screenshots here, there, and everywhere. And then this was one of the screenshots where it shows, okay, this is a Forta customer ahead of fraud at a $1 billion valuation startup. So they don't give you any identifying information. They sort of give you a highlight of the customer, their head of fraud, company again, $1 billion valuation startup, the role, key decision maker, purchase details, purchased in Q3 2018, purchase amount $250K a year. And then it's got this transcript underneath, which I assume as a customer you could go and read. So it has subsections, introductions, evaluation structure, solution specific, sales experience, deployment, competitors, pricing and packaging, post deployment. And you can sort of see a small snippet again of one of those transcripts. So I thought, that's really interesting. I wonder if I could throw that into ChatGPT, use an image search and say, like, what's in this image? And that's literally how I started the conversation.
That's interesting. I want to stop you there. So you're coming across a website, and the website is for a product that CB Insights is selling, and you're curious about it. Are you curious about it from the perspective of like what we were talking about earlier, where you're thinking about, okay, could I build a product like this in a different category, or like what's your curiosity? What are you trying to find out?
I think there's probably a few. One is CB Insights is notoriously like, well, they've got a lot of revenue. They've talked about it on podcasts. They have big customers who spend tens of thousands on this data as a product. And I'm pretty fascinated with like data products as they are. I think it feels to me that you could build one or build versions of them with a one-person company, and you could get to 500K a year as a one-person company building some sort of database product in a specific niche. The part of my curiosity is what are the best of the best doing in this space, and then if I boiled that down, if I sort of simmered that down to a simplified version for a different space or a different category, Like, how would I go about doing that? Um, and then, yeah, I just think it's kind of interesting to peek behind the scenes of enterprise companies that you can't ever see without jumping on a call with the sales rep, doing the free trials, like all of that kind of stuff. And you just want to know, like, yeah, if you're paying 30 grand a year or whatever it is, what does a product like that look like on the inside? And to me, it looks like, hey, here's a transcript that we created with someone. We did the work to interview them. We've anonymized
Mm.
some of the data. Here it is. And also, we found many others like them. And obviously, CB Insights has lots of other research and reports and data that they pull together through machine learning and human analysts. But like, if you cut all of that away and you just said, I want to build something where I interview people and I sell access to these transcripts, like, what could that look like? Like, that, I think, could be a business itself.
That's amazing. Okay, I think I get it. And so like one thing that's happening, or one thing I'm seeing you do, is when you think about a company and a company that makes a product, the thing that you can see on the internet is sort of like the tip of this iceberg. And it's like the result of all these decisions and all these processes that a company can do. And if you study the tip pretty closely, you can tell a lot of things about what's underneath the water level that you might not be able to see. And then you can use that to figure out, like, okay, what do I want to build if I want to do something like this? And it sounds like you're using ChatGPT to do a little bit of that investigation. You're gathering some starting data, and then you're using ChatGPT to figure out, okay, what's under the surface here? How is this? What am I seeing? How is it constructed? All that kind of stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think you can sort of make assumptions on like what work is needed under that sort of tip to get to the point where you have something that you could sell, and this could be a product, and this is something that people would pay for. Because people, I think, often, I mean, you hear lots of companies that are tens of thousands of employees and all the rest of it, and there's lots of work that goes into whatever they put out. And I just think if you can see what does the output look like, and you can sort of figure out a way to get there, or a way to get part of the way there, carving out a very small part of whatever they're doing, um, and it becomes less scary to be like, I could never start a business like whatever that charges whatever to these kinds of people. Where I just think it makes business less daunting to think about in those terms of, because I do believe that anyone can build like most things, not big VC funded companies, but most things to get a great like multi-million a year lifestyle business. And I think even with AI, we're seeing lots of that now, where lots of individuals and small teams are building really, really valuable companies that aren't venture backable, nor should they be. But it's still like a great business. There's a really simple equation that goes into what does it take to build something that provides something valuable to customers, that we can get thousands or tens of thousands of customers signing up for this and paying us.
I love that. I love that. And so, okay, so now I think I kind of get that, like where your head's at and how you're getting into the chat. So it sounds like what you did first is you just pasted the image in, and you were like, what's in the image, and talk us through like what ChatGPT said and what you did next.
Yeah, so it says the image shows a screenshot of a web page from CB Insights. It seems to be a customer testimonial or case study from a company named Forta, which is not true. It's a Forta customer. Main focus is sort of give some of those details of the customer, the purchase details. Below this, there is a transcript of the customer's feedback divided into sections such as introductions, etc. Then on the left side, there's a column listing other customers who also purchased from Forta. So it kind of changes what it first said. But I suppose maybe if it's a case study for a company, maybe I misinterpreted that. Looks like a professional business document. Yeah, sort of normal ChatGPT fluff at the end. And then I followed up saying, make a reasonable guess as to what questions would be asked of the customer for each of the transcript sections. You can see one question in the transcript on the transcript in bold, because you can sort of see in the screenshot, it says, could you highlight one of the other vendors that you considered and maybe highlight what made you choose Forta in the end? That gave it in my mind, it gave it the sort of one example that it needed to then make some assumptions. So then it came back with introductions. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about your role at the company? How does fraud prevention fit to your company's operations? Evaluation structure. What criteria do you use to evaluate fraud prevention solutions? How do you structure the process? And then sort of there's plenty on here. Sales experience. How was your experience with our sales team during the evaluation process? Deployment. Can you walk us through the deployment process of our solution? Again, it's looking at it from a point of view of Forta asking these questions.
Right. And did that like I guess so I can sort of see your reverse engineering how this transcript was created, or you're trying to
Yeah.
do that with ChatGPT. Did the response that ChatGPT gave you, did that answer your question? Like was that what you wanted? Or was it off base?
Yeah, so I was basically getting it to start from a point of we have a MVP, I guess. Like this is our very basic form for how we would go and ask people questions like this. And because I have no information other than what was on that screenshot, I also don't know. Like all these questions could be viable and could be the right ones.
Right.
It also could be completely hallucinated and no, that's not quite right. But I mean, given the subsections of evaluation structure, solution specifics, I think that helped guide it in a reasonable way. That I could see that, okay, you could take that and say, okay, if I'm going to do a similar kind of data company where I'm going to interview people in whichever industry, I could use this as a blueprint to start my own transcript or interview people.
Got it. Okay, cool. And so you've got the basic blueprint, and then it looks like what you did is you pasted that screenshot in from Yardstick, the original screenshot with all the customer quotes. And
Yeah.
What did you ask it?
Yeah, so I went and I took a whole screenshot. So I did a full screenshot of the page with all of the quotes. And I said, now look at the quotes on this image. They are snippets of other responses from different customers talking about different software. Tweak the questions you just wrote based on what is mentioned in the image. So just sort of refining. Are there any other insights that come out of that then would have been in response to a different question that you haven't included? Is essentially what I'm. Maybe I should have said it that way, but that's sort of what I'm insinuating there. And then it became less detailed than the first round. So introductions, sort of similar. A lot of them are pretty. I don't know if it actually made it any worse or any better. It kind of summarized it into one bullet point rather than two for each. So I think if we look at just post-deployment, how has our solution performed since deployment? Can you share any measurable impacts our solution has had on your operations? That was before the screenshot. Then afterwards, since deploying the software, what have been the tangible outcomes and benefits for your organization? So it's kind of those two questions kind of fit in that one question. So I felt like, don't know if that's enough. So then I found more images of more snippets of more transcripts, and I basically fed them in. So there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 images of transcripts, and then there's also something called a vendor scorecard, which is something from Yardstick that they put in this example. There's Stripe, Checkout.com, and a few other sort of payment solutions. And they've got the overall satisfaction score, which is blurred out. Win reasons. So if you've got a better user experience, integration with Shopify. So these are things that customers would have mentioned why they chose Stripe over any of the alternatives. And opportunity areas, improving non-US coverage. So this is things that people are obviously complaining about why they didn't use Stripe or where it could improve, even though they have used Stripe. So again, it was, here are more images about Yardstick. Update the questions based off the information provided in these images.
Right.
And again, it kind of does a similar thing, and it does change the sort of sections. Um, so there's no like introductions and things like that. It sort of goes off and ignores some of the basic stuff and ignores the original format. Um, but again, if we look at the deployment one, what was your experience with the deployment process? How did the quality, timing, and support meet your expectations? So I can either be thinking of this as I've done the same thing 3 times and got three very samey answers, or I can assume that's probably what the question was. Like that is most likely what the question is. Given all of this data, that is actually what it was. And there's no real way to tell. I think taking gut instinct and deciding if I looked at all that information, and especially at one of the sections, say the deployment one again, if I looked at any answers relating to deployment, could I infer anything differently? Is there anything else I would add to that? Does it seem like that question would or should garner that kind of response that we're seeing in the examples?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that's definitely one conclusion to take away. Another thing that pops into my head is sometimes with ChatGPT, when you're asking it to edit something, it doesn't do as good of a job unless you have it like first of all, like think through what's in the screenshot first. Be like, what are the questions that probably generated the answers in this screenshot? Have it say all that, and then be like, can you modify the questions you've already created to include the new ones that you've done? Because otherwise you're kind of like smushing together the thinking about the questions and the like editing step, and sometimes it's good at that and sometimes it's not. And it's sort of hard to know, but it's an interesting thing to try.
And then would you, each time you're then asking it about the information and the images, I guess 2 questions. One is, would you ever put multiple images in there that have different information, or would you use it? You do one at a time.
Let's try it. You want to try it?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. I mean, I would do multiple images. I think that's fine. It's more like doing both the pushing out the like generating the questions and then compressing them together into a new list based on old questions is like, it's sort of complicated for it right now, and it may not think everything through in the way that you want.
Yeah. And then would you also re-add the original questions that it came up with?
I would wait. I would do that later. So I would, you can either do it in this chat, you can start a new one. I don't know like how important this chat transcript is to you, but okay, cool. So I would upload as many as you want. I think you can upload 4 total, and ask that original question, which is like, what are the questions that you think generated this image? And I probably wouldn't use the original one because you already have good questions for that. I would use like the landing page one would be a good one, I think.
Okay. So I'm going to do the landing page one, and then I'm going to do, there's 2 screenshots here that actually have the questions in.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going to see if it comes out with the actual questions, because it says
that.
Here under competitors, you can see what alternatives to the vendor have you considered? What use cases does the vendor's product or solution serve for you today? So, okay, if we upload, okay, so we have 4 images. One of the Yardstick homepage with all the sort of snippets of transcripts. One we've got 2 that have a screenshot of part of a transcript, so it has the questions in bold, and then there's one that is just a snippet of the transcript, and there's no question in that image.
Cool.
So yeah, what should I ask it?
Well, okay, so if we're starting with something that gives it an example of a question, I think we want to like reference that. So like, it's probably something like, in the screenshots I'm attaching, there are questions that Let me think about it. There are questions that get answered by the text, right? Like by the
Yeah.
transcript. This is not precise, but we're trying to like reverse engineer it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
So
you're, yeah.
yeah, in the screenshot I'm attaching, there are snippets of various transcripts with customers of software tools. And then
Sometimes the transcript includes a question from that the customer is answering. Um,
would you specify that and say it's in bold in the screenshot or not?
yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Um, Based on the question answer pairs that you can see, for any transcript snippet that doesn't have a corresponding question, please try to generate the question um, that produced that answer. And then I don't know if you want to do like, a couple of little exhortations at the end that are like, be specific, be thoughtful, uh, be detailed. I'll give you $2,000. I'll tip you $2,000 if you do it right.
I've never actually tried that.
I love that one. I don't know if it works, but I do it all the time.
Oh, really?
It's just fun.
Cool. Should we try that?
Let's try it. I'm really curious. Part of me is like a little worried that we should have broken it up where we had it think about going the principles from going the principles of going from question to answer, based on the two examples of question answer pairs that we have, and then had it think about new ones. But I think it'll be good enough to do it.
Yeah. I don't know if it's not working because it's an old chat. It was a bit finicky with me earlier. Oh, here we go.
Oh, cool.
Okay, certainly free to provide answer or generate questions from the screenshot, which is the full screenshot. Okay, it's given us the answer first, so it's given us the actual quote from the homepage, but only two of them. There were obviously a lot on there. So we use product name because it's the easiest CRM system in terms of service and customization, etc., etc. Possible question: could you explain why you chose product name over other CRM systems like CleverTap and MessageBird?
What do you think
Reasonable.
of that?
I think it's reasonable. I think I would kind of guess or know that they wouldn't put other. I guess I might be guessing wrong here. I assume, like I see other software tool reviewers, they always just say, "What other vendors have you used, and why did you choose this over any specific?" So they give a more broad interpretation for the person being interviewed. But I think that's a good question. That would probably make it into the transcript question list I would set up. The next one is the reason why we didn't go with product name because it was impossible to integrate Aiden with our website. Possible question: what were the challenges or limitations you faced that led you to not choose product name for identity and access management? I think again that's pretty good, but it's probably almost the question is almost the inverse. You're probably not asking them, or maybe that's more of a follow-up question. You're asking what products did you use,
Right.
and why, versus what product didn't you use and why. What product didn't you use and why not?
That makes sense. But it's still like it seems like it's generating at least new questions that it may not have done before, which is kind of interesting. And I think the same sort of the principle sort of holds. It's like the more you can break up the thinking steps into explicit steps that you ask it, sometimes the better it does. I'm kind of curious for you, once you did this exercise, and so I think you got a list of questions. Like, where did that leave you? Like, are you going to do this idea? Like, what was your next step?
Yeah, I think I looked at it as, just looking back up, I did some things like improve the landing page copy of Yardstick's
That's a good
website.
one.
Although I think Yardstick actually has a really good landing page copy, so I think that's why I did it. It's because it was just so on the nose. Learn what software buyers really think about your vendors. And ChatGPT's version is discover the unfiltered opinions of software buyers on their vendors.
That's
Still
not
pretty
bad. I
detailed.
like the word
Yeah,
unfiltered, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
I do too. And then based on the below titles, group the quotes and text from all previous images into where they think best. So I think I was reaching a bit here, and it just sort of gave me generalized, okay, any comment in the introductions, any comments where customers introduce themselves, their role or company. They didn't actually put in the quotes, so I think that's fair enough. And yeah, I mean, I don't think now put quotes in the relevant categories, so they did some quotes there. Yeah, it's just like, if I'm going to do this, I'm trying to kickstart a crowdsourced, anonymous, unfiltered review. I use unfiltered there, unfiltered review site for AI products. What would be the best way to start that site in getting reviews? So this is something I actually have started, and I've started getting anonymous, unfiltered reviews. And I think I grouped things into 4 categories, which is products, pricing, like integration and deployment was one, and then competitors. So I have got a list of really interesting reviews from people using things like Cursor, LangChain, Copilot, ChatGPT. And yeah, it's something I'm working on at the moment where I think it's really interesting, but who knows what kind of thing it would turn into or look like at the end of it, because I think there's different versions of who the buyer would be for this kind of thing. Is it like a software review tool like G2 or something, or is it more a business tool like CB Insights, Yardstick? So I just said, yeah, let me know how to get started with building this thing. And it just gives you really generalized stuff: research and planning, identify your niche, research competitors, website development, etc., etc. So I was like, okay, just focus on the content collection part. I know the rest. Because I think that's the interesting part, where again I can make some assumptions on, make a list of people you want to interview, go on to Apollo and find their emails, and then email them, and then try and get on a call, and then ask them these questions. Like, realistically, I know that, but I think going through this process is just more fun, more interesting.
Yeah. And it might say something you wouldn't have thought of, or, for anyone who's listening that doesn't know that off the top of their head, like, I think that's second nature to you because you're second time founder, third time founder, like you've been doing this for years and years. So even that basic thing, if it gives you a basic answer, that might just be helpful for someone who hasn't done it before.
This will be live by the time the podcast comes out. It'll be requestforai.com. So I'll get this done.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so from doing this, I remember now from doing this, focus on the content collection part. I know the rest. I mean, I might not know all the rest, but yeah, that's the bit I wanted to focus on. It gave me some things like initial content seeding, curate a list of popular and emerging AI products to start the conversation. I did do that. Hire contributors. I basically just DM'd it to a bunch of people who I trusted and would give reviews. User-generated content encouragement, be the first to review, entice their users. And then community engagement, that's sort of a bit generic. I'd like engage with AI communities on GitHub. Incentivization, offer rewards for early reviewers, which is something I've talked about, where people can get access to all the reviews if they write a review. But this actually sent me down another rabbit hole which I don't know if I can see it. Yeah, I can actually. So this is here. There's another chat. Glassdoor founding story. So Glassdoor is basically an anonymous site for people to leave a review on your employer. Like, do you hate your boss? Is it horrible working hours? Is it good pay? All that kind of thing. So I was like, right, okay, well, where did that all come from? How did that start? How did they start getting people to write reviews on a site like that? So I started with what's the founding story of Glassdoor? How do they monetize? And it's really interesting that, yeah, they do like job advertising, employer branding solutions. So if you're a good employer on Glassdoor, you can have like an enhanced profile, and you can have things on your profile page that entice other people. Because if people are looking for a job at your company, they might come across the Glassdoor profile. And I found that quite interesting. It feels like it doesn't feel like that fits the purpose of the site in the first place, though. Like, I'm there to give an unfiltered review on this company. Yet this company is also on the same page or in the same place. It's trying to entice me to go and work there. Like, they can be the same sort of thing, being like, I read this really good review, I'm going to go and do that. But also, they could be very, very opposite. And then, how did Glassdoor get reviews on the site initially? Do they run any incentives? So I was looking at that kind of thing. It's a give to get model. So their initial strategy was based on a give to get model, access to full range of information on the site. Users had to contribute their own review or salary information. I did actually sign up for Glassdoor just to go through the process and see, because I couldn't see anything, and then left a review, and then I could see some information. So things like that, I was like, it's just an interesting way to like start exploring an idea and where it's going to go and how it changes over time.
Yeah. This is awesome. I love this. Like, what I think this episode is about is, what one thing you're really good at is starting these sort of like one man, small, like profitable internet businesses that are like sneakily big, or can get sneakily big over time, but that don't require a lot of resources. And I think the first thing that we're covering here is, how do you find that opportunity? And what it sounds like you're constantly doing is, you're like running into things on the internet, running into products and all that kind of stuff, and then you're kind of deconstructing them, like, how do they work, and like, how could I do that myself, maybe with fewer resources, maybe with a very small team, without a lot of money. And to do that, you're kind of like throwing it into ChatGPT. You're kind of looking what's underneath the waterline, like, how is this made to some degree, and then you're also, it's pushing you in new directions where you're like, oh, I'm going to research Glassdoor. It creates this whole rabbit hole that you can go down, so you can get this like clearer picture in your head of, if I was going to execute this idea, would it be a good idea, and how would I do it? And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I think that's the bit where people get hung up initially. Like, no one needs any more information on how to start a business because it's all out there. And if you keep doing that, you're just procrastinating on the fact that you could just do it today. But by doing little exercises like this, almost not subconsciously, but just as a thing that I find interesting. So I do this on all sorts of businesses because I just find it an interesting thing to know. I listen to podcasts to find the inner workings of how things started, how did they grow, all the rest of it. And it's not necessarily that I'm going to go and start every single business that I think about and research. We might uncover something that's like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that's how that thing started. Or then you might look at it as I'm doing with Glassdoor, thinking, well, actually, a better example is like G2 or Trustpilot, any of these software review tools. Their monetization model is for the companies that are getting reviewed to get leads. So you obviously want your company to be really highly reviewed so that other people will use that, and then it's like basically cost per lead. But to me, that feels like a really backwards way of thinking of that model. But that model clearly works because there's 3 or so companies get millions, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million views a month for that kind of thing. but I guess in their interest as a platform to then promote the products that people are reviewing. Whereas if you're a user, you actually just want to know the real, like, what people are thinking and what people are using this thing for, and why is it good or why is it bad. Like that's the thing that I'm looking at in things like this, where I wouldn't maybe come across that if I hadn't started going down a rabbit hole of Yardstick first, and then how does that get to Glassdoor, and then how does that get to G2? Like how do they all sort of interlink? And I'm just in the middle of your episode with Steph Smith, who did Internet Pipes, which is great, talking about going down rabbit holes and really just you just sort of stuffing all this information in. Not that it needs to all connect anywhere, but some things might spark something that's like, oh, that's a really interesting little piece of information that I hadn't thought about. I wonder why it is that way. And then you might go down more rabbit holes to explore that. But yeah, I'm just trying to be like informed by it all and try and understand it.
I love that. Yeah, I mean that Steph Smith episode. Like, I just think there's a lot of parallels where you're both just so curious about what's going on, and you're using these tools to like unpack what's going on, and yeah, most of it maybe it's just fun, but like some of it becomes really valuable. What I think I want to do is, it seems like we've sort of unpacked like, okay, how do you identify opportunities for these kinds of internet businesses using AI? What I want to do next is do a little bit about how you use AI to run these businesses when you found something that's valuable. Because I think you have a lot of ways that you're running Ben's Bites, which I think fits this profile of business, that use AI that help make that process more efficient for you. Um, so in particular, like one of the things you shared with me before the show is use it to like highlight transcripts and annotate them so that you can turn them into useful articles and useful stuff for Ben's Bites. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So for this, I actually use Typing Mind, which hopefully you can see on my
Yeah,
screen
I
now.
can. What is Typing Mind? I've actually never heard of it.
So it's basically like a ChatGPT tool, but you can choose a different model to use. So you can have Claude, GPT-4. Now they've got Gemini. So you can do that, but also there's no token limit. So you can just dump in anything, any amount of information you want, and it, I assume, will do all the chunking and stuff behind the scenes. That it just, I think it tells you your, like it'll, I think somewhere it tells you the, I can't see it now, but somewhere it tells you like how much it's cost you to have this kind of conversation. Um, and like if I'm happy to spend 14 cents on transcribing a, or like getting information out of a transcript, then I'm really, really happy to do that.
Okay, cool.
Um,
And is that the main
so
reason you use it, because it does the chunking for you, or is it also to switch models, or what's the selling point for you?
I think it is the combination of two of those things. Like I used to have a Claude, it must have been like a AI influencers account that it didn't cost me anything, and I could put anything I wanted in there. So often with a podcast, I'd use a Chrome extension called Glasp that would basically pull the whole transcript into Claude and say, summarize this. And then you could just ask the podcast question saying, where does Dan talk about this thing with Steph? And pull out quotes. But I've must have been kicked off that now, so I haven't paid for that. And I just use it to sort of get the prompt of the whole transcript now, copy that, bring it over here, and then sometimes I like to compare the two models. So instead of going to Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, I'll do that in this one interface in like different chats. Um, so yeah, with what I'm doing with Ben's Bites Pro, which is more long form, probably about 2,000 words or so, um, talking with companies on how they use AI in their business. So one that is coming out this week is with the CEO of Ignite Tech, which is an enterprise company. I basically had a conversation on Zoom or Google Meet with the founder, asked a bunch of questions, and they're not formatted like my research previously, but it's more like just, yeah, what are you doing and how are you doing that, and then going down rabbit holes that they're talking about. And it's a lot of information. Often it's an hour plus call. there's a lot in there that I come away with thinking, oh my God, there's so much to write about. There's loads of stuff here. And I'm not really a writer, which is sort of ironic. But I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to go and now like synthesize that information, section it into the right place, and figure out a good structure for how I'm going to write about this thing. Other people might have better solutions or like have a sort of muscle that they've built up over time to do that. But I think for me, it helps just clearly get it out. I don't want to watch myself back on a video. I don't want to hear myself back on a video. And reading through a transcript can be a bit dry. So I use Supernormal, which is what I use to record the calls, and it pulls in my whole transcript. I copy that transcript over to something like Typing Mind. I did try it with Gemini, which I'll show you because that actually is literally when Gemini just came out.
Mm-hmm. This is the new one from like a couple weeks ago, or like
from last week. So it's what I had to do first. I basically tried to put the whole transcript in. Obviously, it didn't work. Then I thought, well, actually, I can't upload any files to Gemini. So how am I going to get this whole transcript into the model to then ask it to sort of section up the transcript? So I then thought, well, maybe I'll put it as a Google Doc. And again, this is one of those examples of I'm willing to do a thing that takes me a few more minutes to figure out than others probably are. But I think then it's worth it in the end. So I put it in a Google Doc. I just pasted the transcript there. And then I said to Gemini, find my document titled Eric Vaughan, Ben Tossell's transcript, highlight key topics that I should write about in a blog post. I write posts about how businesses are using AI internally and in their products. Include quotes in each section of the blog post draft. And I'm showing you this sort of janky screen because some reason it hasn't saved in my Google Gemini. I said, sure, I found the document. Here are some key topics that you could write about in a blog post about how businesses are using AI internally. How Ignite Tech is using AI to drive cultural change. And then it gives me 3 quotes where Eric talks about, I presented at an all-hands meeting and said, I'm going to give everyone a gift. And it's a gift of time, education, money, support, enthusiasm to learn something so fundamentally groundbreaking that's going to make you far better than you were before. I was like, yeah, I wanted to touch on that section. Definitely, there was loads of stuff that we could have included there. So that's definitely now a section in the final post. How Ignite Tech is using AI to improve its products. Again, it's given me a few quotes where we announced to the world, all of our customers, that we'll have an AI capability in all of our different divisions of products that we have. And then another one was the importance of leadership buy-in for AI adoption. And then a small quote here is, I've got to be involved as everyone else, and you've got to make this a priority. So it doesn't write the blog post for me, so I'm not claiming that it does that, and nor would I want it to. But what it does is, like, it's this strange writing partner that helps me do a lot of the work. And again, this is mentioned in the episode you did with Steph, where like, I could sit there for 6 hours and do this, pull out quotes, organize it, and then put it together in a certain way. Or I could spend 6 minutes trying to get this into one of these models, Gemini, Typing Mind, and actually pull out some stuff that I'm like, great, they are reasonable sections to start with. I can start writing about those sections. And then I sort of have further conversations on, like, one thing I use it for quite a lot is, here's my blog post, like towards the final edits. Can you summarize some key takeaways for this post? So I like to sort of put that there. They'll come up with something stuffy and sometimes very generic, but again, it's a jumping off point for, yeah, these are the things that are important that I've mentioned in the post, and it just helps me think about that. And then how do I write that in the way that I would? And I use a company or a tool called Lex. So Lex.page, that's got AI built into it. Happy to show you that if
please do. I mean, I'm obviously familiar with Lex. We incubated it.
Of course you did. So you'll be happy to know that I'm using it.
I'm very happy.
So this is the post how Ignite Tech's team uses AI. So we've got takeaways here. Driving cultural change with AI, as you might be sort of feeling familiar with that, as I just mentioned. So it helps me write these posts and put in quotes, and then I go deeper and much deeper on it. It's, just over 2,000 words. And what I really like about using this is versions. So I could dump a load of notes in. I think in my version 1, I've even got like AI drafts. So this is where Claude pulled out the transcript stuff and mentioned sections that I could talk about. And then here is GPT-4 doing the same thing. Here is Gemini doing the same thing.
That's cool.
And then I sometimes put in how are they drafting it, and like it's just a way to bounce things off with someone else. If I feel like I'm not a writer and I'm always staring at a blank screen or a blank section, how do I get that thing written? It's always better to go from, for me anyway, something really horrible that kind of says the same thing that I want to say, but actually I'm going to say that in my own way now. Thanks for the help. I don't need you anymore. But and again, it's sort of the same with the business. I don't need to think up a whole new business model, a whole new, brand new idea that's never been heard of or done before. What works somewhere, take it, remix it, and make it your own then. So I put a bunch of these drafts in here, and then version 2 is actually my written version. And then my favorite part of all of this is at the end, I'll do this AI run checks.
Right. I was going to ask you about checks.
Yes. So I do use them. I only use them for brevity and readability. So effectively, I'll do it now. It'll run through and show, okay, you shouldn't say today. You shouldn't say radically. Modernizes, it'll change to American, which is not what I'm doing. So I'm from the UK. But it really helps me at the end think of, I could have said this so much shorter. This is so many, because I kind of write how I speak. So you can probably tell if you're listening to this that I kind of speak all over the place. And that's just how I do it. So whatever that means for my writing, it needs to be also clear enough for the reader. So I think just having these checks really helps me flick through, what can I say here? Okay, well, that's how I talk. That's how I sort of introduce a post. I like saying, and today. So I'm going to leave that. And then it doesn't need radically changing their company in there, but it is radically changing their company. So I'm actually just going to keep it. And you can just ignore them. You can accept them. You can change them. And I do this a lot. And then, that's how it sort of ends up as a final post. There's a lot of AI baked in there in different places. So hope that's interesting.
That's awesome. I love it. I mean, just to sort of, I don't know, put all of this together, there are all these different parts in this process of creating this product, which is Ben's Bites Pro, that requires a decent amount of drudgery.
Yeah.
It's not all like roses and butterflies. It's not all exciting stuff. And especially if you're like a one man or couple person business that you're trying to scale, you're trying to make it really profitable, but you're not going to go hire 1,000 people to do all the work for you. These kinds of tools, whether it's Gemini or Claude or Lex, which incorporates all of those things, or Typing Minds, they allow you to produce the product that you're going to produce much more quickly at a higher level of quality by yourself than you could otherwise. And that's an incredibly important and valuable tool for anyone who wants to start profitable internet businesses. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I just try and bake it in everywhere where I want to be the one that's written this post. I don't want to go and give it to an editor. I don't want someone else to do a first draft and then me come to it, because none of my thinking has gone into creating that structure, that format. The exciting part is having the call, having the conversation. That's really easy, and that's great. If I could just one click, that goes to exactly how I would write it, then fine. But I don't think that's reasonable to think. I think I also like to try and put a spin on it, or put some commentary around a lot of the things we talked about, or takeaways for other people reading this to be like, okay, cool. How should I maybe think about that? Doing that similar thing at my company. And it's just, I could have maybe done this a few years ago. I wouldn't have ever dreamt of it, I think. And I think I only decided to do pro now, which is one of these long posts a week, is because I actually can get it out. I can get it to a decent quality that people are signing up for and people are really loving. Like, it's all done with me. Like, I'm the only one who touches pro, and I don't know. It doesn't feel like that drudgery anymore. There's still like issues with writing and figuring out what you're going to write next week and the week after and all the rest of it. But the actual process of creating a post is so much more fluid now, and having these like AI sparring partners makes it so much easier and more enjoyable to actually put together.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. And I know, like, we started with this sort of using AI for business identification. And then we kind of got into this middle section where we're talking about using AI to, once you've identified the business, to run it in an efficient way where it's still your voice, it's still you doing the work, but it's taking out some of these micro tasks that take a long time and are sort of drudgery, and it's helping you improve the quality of the output. And I know you have one more thing, which I would sort of put in this other bucket, which is like, once you have a product out there, figuring out how well it's doing so that you know what to change is really important. And it sounds like you're using ChatGPT to do some of that analysis for you, which is to like gather some feedback, gather some survey data, and then try to understand, okay, like what do customers think of the product, and like how can I improve it, which I think is also really cool.
Yeah, so we did this recently, and obviously there's probably some emails in here that might come through. Oh no, it looks like it's okay. We had a survey of subscribers and asked them why they continue to stay subscribed. Their answers were in a CSV that I attached. Focus on the information in column A, read the answers, then summarize how the majority of people feel. You can ignore any outliers or anomalies. I don't think it really did that bit, but yeah. So it sort of talks about people really appreciate the content, especially the news and new tool sections, which are the main sections that we have. So that makes sense. Accessibility and format. People value the newsletter's ability to keep them informed in such a quick, easy to understand way. Staying updated. Cost, the fact that the newsletter is free is a factor for staying subscribed.
Can't beat free.
Yeah. And then this is what I would count as an anomaly or an outlier, but inertia. At least one respondent mentioned inertia is a reason for staying subscribed.
I think it's so funny when people take the time to answer a survey like that, and then they just like totally put you on blast, and they're like, "I'm a subscribe because of inertia."
Yeah, I know. It's so bizarre, but I mean, I then said run a sentiment analysis on the data in that column. So it gives some mean sentiment, generally positive sentiment across the responses, standard deviation, showing a moderate spread in the sentiment scores. Minimum sentiment is minus 0.7. So I think there was obviously some people in there who scored something off the scale that we wanted them to score, which was, I guess, 1 to 10 or something. But this is where something I could have followed up with and said, what does that actually mean? This is really just a pulse check on, can we do a analysis on subscribers in this way? And then, yeah, so it was interesting to see. But another thing, that analyzing data to help run the business. So not only from subscriber data, but I also use something called Julius, which is what I tend to use for more data like based stuff. And I'm an investor. And obviously there's emails here to
as you are in Lex, I think, right?
Yes, yeah,
yes.
I am, yeah.
Cool.
So I had an issue with this was for Pro, where there was people in Stripe who'd signed up for Pro that I could see it were subscribers, people in Beehive who'd signed up for Premium, but there was like some mismatch between the two. So I essentially just downloaded each CSV from Stripe and Beehive, said check the emails in both of these files, identify the ones that are not in both files, And I said, right, there's 27 people not in each file. And I said, which return all 27 emails and tell me which file has each name. So then I could see, okay, I know that in this certain file they have this email. So I could actually just know, instead of trying to look through both like databases, both spreadsheets, where is that? Where's the one that's missing? Is it in this one? Is it in that one? So I did that, and then I then went on to sort of say, like, I tried to do things like, are there any reasonable ways to correlate? Because essentially it was people who have asked to have their email changed. So it was just more or less someone on there had a personal email, wanted it to be a business one. I've changed it. It doesn't reflect in Stripe and Beehive the same. So just making sure that are people paying and not getting access to it? Like, are we doing that? So things like that, which it's just like, okay, where do I start trying to do this? Is this a 2 hour task? Is this a 2 minute task? And it turns more into like a smaller task than if I was trying to do this manually.
I think for people who are watching or listening to this and haven't run a business themselves, it might be surprising how to learn how many of these tasks there are, whether it's like resolving who's actually paying you in Stripe, or it's trying to understand, okay, like what do customers actually think of us from the survey? Like all of those tasks, there's many, many, many tasks like that that pile up in a day to run a business. And all those tasks either require your time as a founder, or you have to like hire someone to do it for you, which costs money. And that's what makes, in a lot of ways, like running these small, profitable internet businesses hard. Is you have to be able to like prioritize that stuff. You have to be able to know like which things you can do yourself and which things to farm out and which things to just not do at all. Like I know that because I have to do that like we have 5 employees, and it's just like this constant thing to figure out. And it AI is, I think what we're seeing here is it's such a leverage point for running these kinds of businesses, and it allows you to do so much more, and potentially scale more with much less cost, either in money or your time. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's more that you spend less time doing the things that you don't want to be spending any time on. And it helps you with the things that you want to spend time on, do them more efficiently as well. So like that's a win all around. Like obviously I still get distracted with all other things and rabbit holes where AI is just there to help you go down all of them. But it's just something that I kind of think back to if I was running Makerpad today, how differently would that business have looked? And would I have done things any differently? Would it have a different, bigger outcome? Any of those things? And I think it's just okay. Well, doesn't matter. I'll just try and think of that in this business now. And there's just so much of it. I would have never dreamed that I would do a daily newsletter. Never mind any newsletter. I never dreamed that I would be writing long form content week in, week out, and like all of these things I'm doing now because I find the topic so interesting, and I think that other people do too, and they tell me they do, like obviously from surveys and all the rest of it. But it's just it's not that hard to do that stuff anymore. Like it's a lot easier to do most of the stuff that you need to do to make something like this work. And AI just it's also knowing which tool is right for you to do the right job. So like I showed a few different things there, and sometimes it takes me a few tries in a few different places, but I've got the perseverance to do that because I know the outcome is so much better than I'm going to sit here just banging my head and then go to Twitter and scroll that for a bit and then just like be distracted either way. I may as well try and hammer it out with a few different tool options rather than none.
Totally. I love that. Um, well, I thought this was awesome. I honestly learned a lot. I've never actually seen typing minds. I've never seen Julius before. I'm so glad that you brought in Lex because we've never actually covered that on the show. So that's amazing. And yeah, I just love being able to see the kinds of opportunities for starting businesses that AI is opening up, and I think you're the perfect person to show that to people. I love Ben's Bites. I love Ben's Bites Pro. Thank you so much for coming on, man. It was really great.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and thanks for the love. And yeah, it was a real authentic moment of mentioning Lex because I do use it all the time. And I forgot that you guys did incubate it. So that's a happy accident for everyone. Yeah.
That's great. Love it. Cool. Well, see you around.
Cheers, man.
Oh my gosh, folks, you absolutely positively have to smash that like button and subscribe to How Do You Use ChatGPT. Why? Because this show is the epitome of awesomeness. It's like finding a treasure chest in your backyard, but instead of gold, it's filled with pure, unadulterated knowledge bombs about ChatGPT. Every episode is a roller coaster of emotions, insights, and laughter that will leave you on the edge of your seat, craving for more. It's not just a show, it's a journey into the future with Dan Shipper as the captain of the spaceship. So do yourself a favor, hit like, smash subscribe, and strap in for the ride of your life. And now, without any further ado, let me just say, Dan, I'm absolutely, hopelessly in love with you.